Hey guys, welcome back to Pack Talk with me, your host, Pete Vodden. I'm here today with the delightful Emily Cabell / Emily
Hello.
Vodden. Um, and we want to do a podcast today for you guys, it's kind of about us. It's kind of about how we are managing this situation. Obviously, we have the 4 gyms now. We have 2 kids. We're married. We live in the mountains. We spend a lot of time in the car, a lot of time driving, trying to get through, to all the gyms, checking on the teams and so
We
forth.
still teach classes,
We
have
still
personal
teach classes,
training.
have personal training. There's a lot that goes on, and this is kind of like, how you have those Instagram people that you watch and you follow, and they're talking about, their day, and how what they had for breakfast, and then they went to the gym and they did this and then they did that, and they're 22 years old. They don't have any responsibilities. They don't have any kids, and it's just
Here's
annoying.
what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, and it's like, you don't know anything about what you're talking about. Just shut the fuck up. Because the reality is, for most of us, that isn't our life. We all have jobs, responsibilities, families, pets, whatever it is. We all have a lot going on, and it takes a lot to manage that. So we want to talk a little bit about like our life and our structure and how we
How
are
we
making
manage it.
this, how we manage it, how we're making this work. And this isn't to say like we've got it figured out. We do it all perfectly, because we make a ton of mistakes. We have bad days. We have very, very, very stressful moments. So this isn't, the perfect life by any means. But this is just maybe some information that may be helpful to help you guys maybe organize, move forward, and build things. That is our goal. We like building things. We are both Aries. We are both entrepreneurial.
Love to ram our heads through walls
Yeah,
and
we
do
love to
all the
ram our head through
things.
walls, and it would be very easy for us to just derail, because we can just go, 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 go to the point where we just collapse. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to collapse. We want to build. We want to grow. We want to run successful gyms. We want to build successful teams. We want to be good employers. We want to treat our employees well. We want to run good companies, good solid companies.
Want to be happy together, want to make sure that our kids are
Yeah,
well loved and feel that, like, they are a part of Pharos and not
yeah,
not a choice between work and life, that
yeah.
we can kind of do all of that together.
And just overall, that we're contributing, right? We're contributing towards society. Trying to make the people around us feel better. Trying to, it sounds like a hippy dippy thing to say, but trying to make the world a better place in some fashion. Whether it's making people healthier, or providing people with community, or getting helping people recover from injury, whatever it is. Like, we want to be useful, and we want to be here to be useful. So that comes with a responsibility that we take very seriously. And so, yeah.
And I do hear all the time, like, especially now, every time I go into the gyms, someone inevitably says, man, how do you do what you do? Like, God, I see you guys in one gym and then you're here that day and here the next day. Like, how do you guys do what you do? And I was thinking about it. And while, yes, we are not perfect, there's one thing that, like, we have so much more capacity. Like, our capacity now and the things that we do, our responsibilities, our, everything that we can kind of get done, our productivity now compared to 8 years ago when we were first building Pharos is like night and day. Like, we are not the same people we were before. The things that stressed us out, are now not even drops in the buckets of stress. So our capacity to deal with things,
Right.
I think, is a lot more. So I think that we do come from a place of, well, yes, obviously everyone's life is stressful and nobody's life is perfect. We have kind of been able to manage it with a little bit of a framework. There's always a little framework, right? Okay, so I'm going to dive right in. And I really think everything boils down to 2 things: your staples and your schedule. And if you can workshop and brainstorm and you, like, really fine tune what your staples and your schedule are, then you can basically achieve anything. Like, whether it's in fitness or in finance or in relationship building or in, career building. Like, I really think that those are the 2 things that need most of your attention. Really, like, taking inventory and developing a value system around your staples. And we'll get into that. And then, of course, your schedule. So I created, like, a little framework before this. You guys know I journal a lot. I talk a lot about it. And sometimes I just journal nonsense. And sometimes I try to framework it myself, where if I can take my own stress and put it into a framework, I feel like it really helps me. So I hope it really helps you. So this is my framework to do everything everywhere all at once without burnout. So the first piece, there's kind of four steps. So I'll just go one at a time,
Yeah.
and then we'll dive into all of them. Yeah. So the first one is to define the win, or define your priorities. And there's kind of two pieces of that. One is like we start off with our buckets, right? So I'll just go off of my buckets. So I have the parenting bucket, my marriage bucket, my overall relationship bucket. So the rest of my family, my friendships, all of that kind of stuff. I have my, fitness, my fitness bucket. And then I'm like framing over because I know that I had other buckets. And I have my hobby bucket. Like that is a big thing, like the thing that brings me like personal satisfaction. So it's like I have my family and relationships, I have my career, and then I have my, kind of hobbies and
family
like
lifestyle.
Yeah. So those would be like just my overarching buckets. What would be yours?
I mean, similar. Obviously, training is a huge bucket for me. Like we've talked about this in the podcast before. Like training is kind of my staple. It's kind of what keeps me grounded, and it needs to be a daily thing for the most part. Obviously, I do take rest days and I do have days off, but it's kind of like that is what anchors me. And then I kind of have my creative bucket. So stuff like this, like the podcast, stuff like programming, stuff like the emails I've been writing on the weekends for the pack perspective. So there's like an artistic creative side that is definitely a bucket. Then of course my relationships and my family, that's definitely a bucket. I don't really have any friends anymore, so that doesn't really matter. But hobbies,
you have
definitely.
Literally 1,000 friends in all of the pack community.
But definitely like hobbies is a big one for me. You guys know I like to ride horses and stuff like that. So I find if that isn't in my life, then it's not good. I think sometimes when Emylee's talking about buckets, sometimes it's easier to like negate buckets and think, oh, I haven't got time for that bucket. But the problem is when you take that bucket out, it makes you miserable and less productive. So even though some buckets take time, like riding a horse takes time, it's important that it's in there, because if I don't have it in my life, like negative thoughts come into my brain. I'm less productive. I'm less good at other things that I do. I don't feel fulfilled, and it just has a negative impact on other things. So
I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now because it's a perfect kind of metaphor. It really is like you have your buckets, and you have to think of your buckets as like a DJ switch, where sure, if you max out at 100, all of the levels, then it's going to like, blow out the speaker. It's not going to be good. But if you can kind of play around with the dials, move this up, move this down. So that way the overall, like there's still balance to the song, balance to like the soundtrack of your life. It sounds, silly, totally. But I always think about that as like, okay, I'm going to move this up here because I know that this is what's required, priorities right now. Okay, so first you have your buckets, and then you kind of have like the responsibilities within each bucket. And for instance, if I'm just speaking like fitness, or if I'm just speaking like career, I define my buckets, like my responsibilities as as one of the owners of Pharos, as like the CEO in a tiny company of Pharos, then I would say my buckets are vision, marketing, training and development, finance, operations, and then programming. And it's not that I do the programming, it's just that I am that is a bucket that I always want to feel proud of and a part of and be, in. So I have, we have our own personal buckets that have our life. And then within that, you kind of define, okay, what are my overarching responsibilities? Like, what is my job, both as, the career, and then you can do that with the other buckets of your life, right? What's my job or the responsibilities in my creative life, where, that was a great example where it's like, you're just not the same person. You're not as happy. You're not as fulfilled. You're not as calm. You're not, when you don't take time to ride horses or do archery, that are like forms of meditation for you, So finding that balance and knowing what the like role and responsibilities within each bucket are is kind of like all a part of, piece number one. So step number one is define your priorities. And I always just start off with a brain dump. Like you can see, if I were to show you my blah, right. It just starts off on like I call it an organized brain dump, because usually I pocket it into categories and then I just go buck wild and I go from there. So that's step number one, is just like define the win. If you're doing goals in fitness, we do the same thing. We sit you down and we say, okay, cool. Define the win. What would winning look like for you? What do you want to do? What are you excited about achieving? What rocks your boat, keeps you motivated, all that kind of stuff. So define the priorities. And then it's kind of like define where you are right now. One tenet that we have, just like it's in our culture deck, it's in our coach's code. One biggest thing as a coach is you have two things before you can even coach. You must connect before you coach, and then meet them where they are. And so when we think about our own goals, we have to do the same thing. So it's like, here's where I want to go. And then now the next step is I have to see where I'm actually at and where either the deficits are in that, where my current commitments are lying. So based off of what I want, my priorities right now may not be the same. Just like we were joking about how last year after the Open, you were like, I'm training for semifinals. And everyone in the back end is like, oh, yeah. With 4 gyms, 2 kids, under construction, building all that. Yeah, sure. And so it's like, okay, where's the current commitments that we are at that's going to help us then kind of define where our priorities and where, our actions are going to be from there. Anything that you want to say on that?
Yeah, no, just to kind of like add to that, again, kind of with the buckets thing and where you put your priorities. It's the other thing to always remember is, I think sometimes we feel guilty about certain things. We apply guilt to certain activities, like, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this because I should be doing that. And I certainly feel that sometimes. But the problem is, like I said, it is a balance. And if you take out too many of the things that bring you enjoyment in your life, and your life just becomes about like work, and everything is related to like trying to do the business better, then there's a huge missing gaps in your life. So try to get out of that feeling of guilt. And I will say, like, it's easier for me because I have a great wife, and she is very supportive of my pursuits, just as I'm supportive of hers. So it's a kind of like a tag team thing where, like, if I'm going off riding, then she has the kids, and if she's off doing something, then I have the kids, and it has to be that symbiotic relationship in order for you to be able to do those things. So I feel very lucky in that way, but I do feel like those things are important because it is easy just to get stuck in the grind. And you were saying earlier on about how we've kind of like, we're a lot more efficient at running the business now than we were 8 years ago. And a lot of that is like, you have to trust other people to do things for you. You have to delegate, and you have
That's
to.
my next piece,
Oh,
Peter.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're skipping my steps.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But
it's a framework for a reason.
Yeah. But yeah, being able to step away from the in and outs of the daily activities of Pharos, trust other people to run things and manage things, and you and me, like, as kind of like the vision for the overall brand of the company, like branding vision. What do I want this kind of like hybrid gym to look like? If I'm going to focus on that stuff, the big stuff, like, I can't also focus on all the little intricacies of the day-to-day operations.
On that note,
Yeah.
So on the define where you are, that is also, so there's like where your current commitments are, where your current schedule is, and then there's the non-negotiables. And we already have an episode on that, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But the non-negotiables are like what you base your value system on. So I always started off with, I am the kind of person that, or no matter what, I blank. Piet talked about training daily, that kind of thing. So establishing that, laundry list, or, 3 to 10 things that are like, no matter what, I do this. So it becomes the mantra that when, faced with where my priorities lie, I know that, well, this is one of my non-negotiables, and that's where it's going to be. Okay, so you must define where you are. And then step number 3 is schedule it. But before you can schedule it, I have this kind of the 4D audit. I stole this. I don't know who I stole this from, but it was built off of, it was probably from an Amy Porterfield podcast. And it was on someone talking about emails. So every morning they open up their inbox, and, it's like you can get drowned in thousands of emails. And so he kind of goes through this 4D audit, and I will share it with you because you can use it for more than just emails. You can use it for literally everything. So for each of the things, so each of like my organized brain dump of buckets and then responsibilities, or if it's just a simple, like, here's the to-do list that I have today, and there's 25,000 things on it seems, then you go through, and for each of them, you ask yourself, can any of these be deleted? Like, just literally, like, obviously it started with emails, but it's like, is any of these just actually not that important right now? Can it just be deleted? Then the second one is, can it be delegated? And that was a super important thing for us as we're growing the business, because we want to do everything. We want to be a part of everything, and we are a part of so much. And so that's been the biggest challenge for us, is how to like build a team of empowerment that they feel that they can do all of the things without us stepping on their toes. It's more that than the other, so delegated. And then what needs to be deferred. So just like save for later, like, actually, when I look at my priorities, this isn't the number one priority. So I am going to put it at the bottom of the to-do list. And then, of course, anything that's left is supposed to be done, right? So the 4Ds are deleted, delegated, deferred, and then done. And that usually helps me when I make my list. Then I look at my list and I'm like, okay, I got to do all these website edits. I have like the updates on the Limitless Challenge pages that I need to do. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And then I can do those things. And then I look at them and I'm like, but with my 4D audit, I also can delegate it to our incredible website editor who can do it. And if I just, organize myself a little to give her all of the information, then it will be successfully delegated. So deleted, delegated, deferred, and then done. And that usually helps trim my to-do list down at least like 10 to sometimes even 25%, because of just kind of doing that quick checklist. Because a lot of times you think everything is important and everything is number one, but we forget that priority means like of number one importance, that nothing else matters. So you can't, by semantics in theory, you can't really have 25 priorities or 5 priorities. It's like, it's really, what is that one thing?
In the beginning, we had this app called Commit to 3.
That's on there too. But you can, now's a good time to segue, Peter.
Well,
good job.
Yeah. So the reality is you can commit to 3 big things a day. If you try and commit to 10 things a day, it's not going to happen. But the chances are you will need to, and I think it's possible to commit to 3 big actions in any one day. I'm not talking about little things.
Little ones, happen, 3 big
but
things.
big things that need to be done. What are those big 3 things? Define them, set them out. How's it going to get done? Even like time frame. I'm going to spend 2 hours on this, 2 hours on this, 2 hours on this. These are my big 3 things that I need to get done today, and commit to those. And by committing to those and doing those things, everything else kind of snowballs from there in a good way.
Yeah. So step number 3 is obviously schedule it. And the first step of scheduling it after you've done that kind of like 4D audit is confer with the people that matter most. So obviously you're like checking in with your partners and figuring out like, okay, these things are really important to me. These things are really important to you. Obviously we have these things that are really important to each other. And so how do we kind of make time and do all of that? And for us, it's hugely important. Piet and I, I'm trying to get us to schedule a quarter out, which is not how Piet's brain works like at all. But it went from us being like, oh, let's just look at the next week in advance. Like, what does our week look like? And it's like, okay, you're taking the kids here and I'm going down to Palm Springs and you're going to LA and there you're going here, blah, blah, blah. And then now it was like, okay, can we look at the next month in advance? And not like everything is scheduled to a T, but to Piet's point, what are those big things that we need to plug in there of priorities so that we make sure that then, nothing slips through the cracks there. So we kind of have different scheduling tools. I love to time block schedule. So I do use Google Calendars and I time block and color code by category. So it's like I can look at my calendar and be able to see over the last week what I spent more time on. Like right now, for instance, I'm spending a ton of time on training and development and operations and marketing. Those are like the 3 things of my 6 buckets. Training and development is number 1 because we're opening up Palm Springs. And so it's a lot of time on that. It's also using those things and learning lessons there to try to, to try to like retrain or build more robust trainings at the other location. So that's kind of my primary focus there. And if you look at my calendar, you can see that, If I were to say, oh, my focus was on programming, well, then if I look back at the last 3 months, well, I've severely, neglected that because there's nothing on there. So I like to color code and time block and do all of that. I teach classes every week. I have a PT. I run tons of meetings. And so I usually go through and do the have-tos. I schedule the have-tos first. And then I try to, this is not my advice, it's everyone's advice. It's like, what is the hardest thing? What is the thing that you're avoiding? What is the thing that always ends up at the bottom of the to-do list? But you know that if you were to complete this one thing, that by doing that one thing, it would make all other things either easier or unnecessary or whatever that book was, so I try to, when I think about scheduling, it's the have-tos and then it's the hard-tos, like the things that are just hard to get to. And I try to schedule that second because I know that ultimately those are going to be the things that move the needle forward most. And then, obviously we kind of fill in the rest of those pieces.
Yeah.
So I also, either commit to 3, so 3 big initiatives, either sometimes you can do that by week. That's kind of where my brain is now. I feel like the things that I'm working on are not just things I can get done
take more than a day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if we are actually working on big picture, big vision things, then usually it's like, okay, what are the 3 big things I'm working on this quarter? Can I tackle those, 3 things and check in on them in a weekly basis, as opposed to feeling like it is a, do this, do that kind of thing. And then, so the big 3: time blocking, using Google calendars. Sometimes, like Pieter, he doesn't use any Google calendars. He really leans into that 3 initiatives. He'll put that, as a note on his thing. He wakes up, or preps the night before and does that. One thing that really helps me, most of my journal entries, the longest ones anyway, are on Sundays. Pete always sees it because right now we're watching 1923, and he'll see me kind of, secretly, not so secretly, journaling, sitting there. And it's just to get my brain onto some paper about the Monday hour 1. I stole this from Layla. Thanks, Layla.
I'm sure she's watching.
Exactly. No, she stole it from somebody else. But it's basically using the Sunday or the weekend, or sometimes if you have like hard boundaries of not working on weekends, then like the Friday. But anytime like you're having a moment or an hour or a half an hour, whatever that is, but a time blocked schedule to the formula is look back plus look ahead. So I'm going to look back at my week, look back at my last couple weeks, see where my priorities were, and then look ahead. What are my 1 to 3 initiatives that I'm, kind of attacking? And then that, kind of gets divided by the overall vision, like the overall, like, okay, am I moving the needle forward? So when I look back at my week pass and I'm looking ahead at my week, then I look like, okay, am I actually moving the needle forward on having like on opening up Palm Springs? Am I actually training and developing our team? Are we actually doing these things?
Yeah, so, and I think that's something really important you always have to go back to, like what are we actually trying to do?
What
here?
Are we actually doing? Because otherwise we'll just do everything and we'll just have an endless to-do list. But if you don't have that moment to like look back and be like, is this actually moving us towards or away from? And now I get like, and again, it's kind of like a mixture of our life plus the business, because, as a married couple building a business together from the very scratch, it's like there has been very little separation. We've done it all together from the very beginning. But one thing or 2, we try to choose like a word each year. And this year there are 2 words. So in 2025, the biggest things for our company across, like for Pharos and, for us, is community and cohesion. Cohesion is very important because obviously it's 4 locations. And if they're all running slightly different or slightly different systems and all that, it's a nightmare. So how can we like build more cohesion across that? And then how can we build more community, both within the community itself? So in Echo Park and Redondo and Palm Springs and Idlewild, like how can we like nurture that and retain that community and deliver on our promise of being a light in your day and a guide for your limitless potential? And then can we also connect the overall communities? Like we have the Limitless Challenge this year. We're running it across all 4 locations. We're going to do the competition at the end in Redondo and do a big beach party. We want everyone to come, have a big thing about it. It's like we want to connect the overarching, SoCal Pharos community too. And so when we look at our schedules and we look at our stuff, and then we always look, okay, a look back, a look ahead, and then ultimately, is it moving us in the direction towards community and cohesion? And if it's not, then we should nix it. It shouldn't even be on the table. And if it is, then we keep it there.
And the interesting thing about that is, we're kind of in this like blue ocean strategy model where what we're trying to create hasn't really been done successfully before, because we are that kind of like Big Little Gym, right? We're trying to be that mom and pop shop community gym on a large scale. And typically what happens is as soon as that kind of a business tries to scale, the wheels fall off. And then it just becomes like generic kind of like venture capitalist, watered down like chains. And we don't want to be that. We don't want to be a watered down chain. We want to be true to what we started out.
Don't worry, baby. We'll never have enough money to be a watered down chain.
But yeah, so that is challenging, because obviously we want to keep that connection, which is why we travel so much and why we try to get around all the gyms, and we try and have that personal one-on-one kind of interaction with both our staff and our membership, because that's what we love. We love, we are people that love people. So we love seeing people, conversing with people.
Yeah, if we were just looking at Excel sheets and trying to figure out the business all day, like we'd be like, this is not working.
Yeah, we are truly fitness people running a fitness business, and part of fitness is connection. So that's a huge part of everything that we're trying to do and trying to maintain. And again, that's what separates us. That's what separates Pharos from, an Equinox or, another like big box, big chain kind of like facility. So it's really important that we do that. We know that. And then again, that presents a huge challenge. But like Emylee said, that's one of the big things, our big focus points for this year, is to stay connected and to keep focusing on community, because that is what separates us from the competition.
Boom. Step number 4. So just to recap, step number 1, define the win, or define all the priorities, all the buckets, all the things. And then 2, define where you are and where you are currently and what commitments you have and where either the deficit or the opportunity is. And then 3, you got to schedule it. And we got some scheduling tools that usually you got to work with, like kind of your brain. I like color coding. I like, to-do lists. I like all of that. Pieter gets overwhelmed and thinks that it's too complex and it's not necessary. It's like, oh, I waste time doing all this. I'm just going to do the thing, and that's it, just acknowledging how your brain works and then not trying to fight it, just working with the person that you are to make sure, okay, well, you still got to schedule it, because if you don't schedule it, it's not going to get done. So you can't be the kind of person that says, oh, I don't use a calendar, because, well, then you're never going to get what you want done. If you don't schedule it, it doesn't happen, So that really is ultimately the biggest piece in trying to find the way in which you map and think and get and take action, Step number 4 is repair. As always, I always leave room for it. It is a staple in our business. It is strength, conditioning, and of course, mechanics, that you can't build off of bad mechanics. And ultimately, you can't burn the candle at both ends. We have done this. Episode number 2 is going to be why, it's going to be all about this. The second part of this is basically a time in our life when we did not do this, that we did not organize our schedules, that we did not make room for repair, that we just tried to go. And it all fell apart. So the biggest thing that we always go back to is, Piet has the metaphor of putting money back in the bank of your body, where it's like, if you just keep making withdrawals in the form of action and go and get after it, then you're going to go bankrupt. You're going to go broke. So you always have to keep making deposits back in the bank. And some of the deposits that I like to make, obviously I journal. I like to do all the things, like, it sounds silly, but like I like to get those, shower bombs or the bath bombs. And so like all the little scents and the eucalyptus soak things, they just make me feel good. And they are the essence of relaxation. And if they trick me into actually relaxing, then it works, So I have kind of rituals around that, rituals around my nighttime routine, mostly as it relates to face care. I feel like I never cared about anything like face care. I never put on sunscreen, never did anything like that. So now I'm trying to carve out some time to focus on that. And it feels like I'm giving back to myself, myriad other activities, playing guitar, all of the hobby-based things that help to give you back, hanging out with my kids, like literally that 15 minutes when you're putting them to bed and they're just like crawling all over you and being cute and, restless. It's like, I live for those moments. Those are the rest. And, obviously we mean rest physically, but there is also the seasons of this, of anything, and for right now, we are in a season of everything everywhere all at once, like we are in, and of course, we'll always have 4 gyms, and two kids and a family and all of that. We'll always have to juggle all of the things. But right now in particular, it is a lot because we're in this pre-sale. We're in this launch of Palm Springs. It feels like we really just have to race to the finish line and do what we can and know that eventually there will be some time that we are here. But if we're acknowledging that right now we're just in this phase and that it won't be forever, but that it requires a level of intensity and focus and presentness and scheduling that won't be every season of our life, but it is now, that also helps, reminding yourself that it's not going to be forever, that it is just seasons.
Well, the reality is when you open a 27,000 square foot facility, things are going to go wrong. And every day, every single day, 3 things happen that like
the big 3
could like completely derail me and destroy me. And I could be fighting everybody. So with all the best laid plans, with everything that Emylee's talking about, particularly in this last year with the Palm Springs gym, you can plan as much and try and organize as much, but you will always have stuff on a daily basis that just throws punches at you. And you're just like ducking and weaving and blocking and doing everything you can to just keep moving forward. So I feel like for me, this past year has been extremely challenging just because, this gym is amazing, guys. It's an incredible facility. It's the best thing we've ever done, but it's come at a huge cost. I mean, financially at a huge cost, but also just the amount of work it's taken to get it done. I mean, I laid the floors myself. I built the equipment myself. It's not like I was paying someone to do that. So it's like, if anybody was to look at like our lives objectively, they would go, don't do that. Like, get someone else to do that. Everything that Emylee just said about delegation, like, but my stupid, like, got to do it myself, got to be that guy. It's just the way that I'm programmed. It's like, I'd rather just do it myself because I don't trust anyone else to do it.
It's not even that. It's literally the satisfaction at which you look back. Like right now, you walk into Echo Park and you laid down those floors and you built every single one of those racks and you've re-Tetris that equipment 1 million times. And yes, somebody else could have done it. But the pride at which you have knowing that you built that shit with your hands, that like we have all laid down on our hands and knees and like built it with our blood, sweat, and tears. Like that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, me and Kevin were there last week. Me and Andre doing the same thing. So it's like, yeah, it is. I like to be connected to the space as much as I like to be connected to the people. And again, I think if you always just pay people to do all these things for you, then you don't feel as connected. So I do feel like, we hammered every nail ourselves kind of deal. Not true, but you know what I mean? We built it from the ground up with our own hands, and I do feel very connected to every space that we've ever built. But I just wanted to make the point that, it isn't, you can't plan out your whole life and expect to not get derailed. Stuff will happen every day that will derail you, and you have to have enough armor and enough guts and enough grind to get through it and keep moving forward and not just completely lose the plot. And trust me, I've almost lost the plot many times, but with good family, good friends, and a little bit of, I found for me, like, I have to give myself 24 hours. If something happens in the moment that makes me so enraged, I have to walk away from it and almost give myself 24 hours before I respond, because if I respond in the moment, it will not be good for anybody, including myself. So, it's having enough maturity. I think maturity is a good word, because my younger self would have been very impulsive.
I guess in the repair category, there's like patience.
Yeah, for sure.
Like to piggyback on your rage story. To sum that up, it really comes from like a part of the repair process is just having patience and patience with yourself, that like there are going to be bad days and you have to, instead of fighting through them, sometimes retreating back and letting yourself have those days is a part of it. Yeah. All right, we should wrap this up.
Okay.
Yeah. So hope those tips of like productivity or whatever works for you. And also just wanted to, like Piet said, give a little lens, a little look into how we are trying to manage everything as we, do everything everywhere all at once.
All right, guys, we'll be back with part 2, where we'll talk about how not to
8 days in the hospital, baby. We'll talk about going blind, getting hives, and
all the crazy
spending
shit
8 nights in the hospital.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you soon, guys. Take care. Thank you.